Sugar. The alarm tore through the silence at 4:45 a.m., jarring me from a dream I couldn't remember. I slammed it off and lay still for a moment, staring into the dark. 5 more sunrises, I whispered to myself. Just 5. 5 more drives down I-10 beneath that slate-colored sky. 5 more times clocking in. 5 more half-warm cups of break room coffee. Then 30 years of service would finally crystallize into a pension that could carry me through the rest of my days. I could almost smell the cedar boards of that lakeside cabin Marion and I had always said we'd build. Someday, I sat up, swung my legs out of bed, and said it again. Just 5. Salmon. The October air in Phoenix still had a bite at that hour, leftover chill clinging to the desert from the night. I climbed into my old Ford F-150 and watched my breath fog the windshield while the engine rumbled awake. The drive to Redwood Microsystems was muscle memory. As I pulled into the employee lot, the sodium lights still glared over the loading dock. Inside, only the glow from a few exit signs and idle monitors lit the halls. The hum of air handlers filled the place like a low, familiar hymn. Somewhere, a flickering ballast buzzed like a cicada behind a wall panel. It was the kind of sound that called to me more than any meeting ever had. I'm Sam Whitaker, 63 years old, 30 spent inside that glass and steel fortress, though you'd never guess it from my boots or the calluses on my hands. I walked the halls that morning like I always had, with purpose. Worn denim shirt tucked in, work boots tied tight, a ring of master keys jingling from my belt loop. Those keys opened every room in the place. Every server room, closet, roof access, and pump station had been mine to care for. My hair had gone silver years ago, but I still kept it short, clean. Marion always liked it that way. I carried her photo with me in the pocket over my chest, smiling from a summer we thought would last forever. Rumors had been floating around for weeks. Something about Lean 2030 and operational efficiency, a lot of nervous whispers and half-joking comments about pink slips. I always laughed it off. I believed in the promises they made us, the ones about loyalty, pensions, and being taken care of. Then last Friday an email pinged in, mandatory strategic update, conference room 4F, Monday at 10 a.m. My name was in the subject line, not my department's. That detail gnawed at me all weekend. Why was I, maintenance, being called into a strategy session? Then this morning a notification hit my phone again. The meeting time had moved up to 8 a.m., and the title had changed. Now it read, Immediate Restructuring Discussion. My stomach sank. No. I threw myself into my rounds that morning trying to push the dread away. The chiller plant needed a valve recalibrated. One of the elevators in Building C was throwing a weird fault code. I climbed, crouched, tightened, logged. Noah, one of the younger techs, shadowed me like usual. Last week, old man, he teased, you'll be fishing in Tahoe while I'm still chasing ghost codes. I chuckled and showed him how to bleed air from a hydraulic piston. I wanted him ready after I left, but I kept catching myself glancing down the hall toward the executive wing. Evan Brooks walked by without the usual nod, just eyes on his phone, lips moving, ignoring everything else. That brush-off felt colder than the server room. Ishtar. At 7:48 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Meeting starts at 8 sharp. Confirm attendance. I stared at the message for a long second. Then I washed the grease from my hands, swapped my boots for the clean pair I kept in my locker for emergencies, and headed up the stairs. In the mirrored elevator, I looked at myself, upright, worn, and birthing. Outside the glass wall of conference room 4F, the desert sunrise flared orange and pink across the sandstone. I took a breath, scanned my badge, and stepped inside. 2 chairs waited. Only one was occupied. Patricia Lane from HR sat there with a manila folder and a face that said everything and nothing at once. That second chair felt like judgment. I set my clipboard on the table and straightened the collar of my shirt. I wasn't going to slouch into this. The clock above the screen clicked closer to 8. Patricia cleared her throat once, but didn't speak. The silence grew sharp and sterile. Then I heard the footsteps. Evan Brooks entered, his phone gone, hands empty, face flat. He didn't offer a handshake, just opened a laptop, started typing. Keys clicked like distant hailstones against metal. I reached for my ID badge and traced the edge, smooth from years of swipes through scanners. This building had been my life's rhythm, and now something was ending. At exactly 8 in a.m., Evan finally looked up. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, voice clipped and dry, "thank you for coming on short notice." He slid a single sheet across the table, face down. That paper might as well have been a guillotine blade. I flipped it over, and in that moment, the chapter I'd been living in for 3 decades came to a close. What came next? That would be the chapter I never thought I'd have to write. The moment I flipped that sheet of paper over, I knew nothing about that day would end the way it began. The first word, a termination that slammed into my chest like a steel-toed boot. It didn't say thanks or farewell. It didn't acknowledge the 3 decades I gave this place. Just cold lines and legal language, carefully constructed to erase me. Patricia's voice broke the silence. "You'll receive your final paycheck by the end of the week." I kept my face still, but my ears buzzed like I'd stepped into the heart of a running generator. I wasn't even angry yet. I was stunned, like the power had gone out and the world hadn't caught up. The room smelled of printer toner and sterile plastic. There were no windows, no clocks, just the soft mechanical hum of Evan's laptop and Patricia's deliberate voice, reading through the terms of my departure like a bedtime story. The table between us felt suddenly enormous, like a river I couldn't cross. My chair creaked under me as I leaned forward, trying to make sense of the numbers. According to them, I had 29 years and 10 months of service, not 30, not the magic number that triggered full pension benefits. "There must be a mistake," I said. My voice cracked slightly. Evan didn't look up. Patricia did, and her eyes told me it was no mistake. Oshtu. I always prided myself on being the kind of man who kept records. Pay stubs, handbooks, company memos. I had them all. Marion used to joke that I had better files than the IRS. She wasn't wrong. I didn't say much in that room. I signed the papers they gave me, took my copy, and slid my badge and master keys across the table like I was returning library books. But behind my silence, gears were turning. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to beg. But I also wasn't going to vanish quietly. I walked out of the room and into a hallway I knew better than my own driveway. People I'd trained looked up from their desks, then quickly looked away. I wasn't just being let go, I was being erased. I got into my truck and just sat there for a few minutes, staring at the company logo on the loading dock sign. Redwood Microsystems. It used to mean something to me. Loyalty, stability, a place to grow old with honor. Now it meant betrayal. But what stung more than the layoff was the pension. They'd stopped me 4 days short. 4 damn days. I started to suspect it wasn't an accident. That night, I spread the termination paperwork across my kitchen table. The math didn't add up. According to my records, I had 29 years and 11 months. Not 10. I grabbed my binder from the filing cabinet and flipped to my original hiring letter. December 15th, 1993. Not January like they claimed. Then I remembered a company-wide memo Evan had sent last month, an update to the employee handbook. Something about how retirement benefits would now be calculated based on continuous service records. I'd flagged it then just in case. Now it felt like the thread that could unravel everything. I pulled it out and read it again, this time like my future depended on it. Damn. I stayed up past midnight comparing pay stubs, holiday hours, sick days, all of it. It was all there. I had the numbers. I had the dates. But what I didn't have was power. Not alone. That's when I thought of Janice O'Connell. She used to run HR before Patricia took over. Janice was sharp, by the book, and allergic to corporate nonsense. I had her number in my old Rolodex. My hand hovered over the phone for a long time. Calling her would mean admitting I'd been blindsided. It would mean fighting back. I picked up the phone anyway. Janice picked up on the second ring. "Sam Whitaker," she said like she already knew why I was calling. I explained everything, the dates, the discrepancy, the memo, the way Evan had avoided looking at me. She asked questions, specific ones. Do you have the original hiring letter? Can you forward that memo? Any performance reviews from the last 5 years? I had it all. And when I told her that, she went quiet for a second. Then she said, Sam, what they did might not just be unethical. It might be illegal. Janice told me to bring everything to her office first thing Monday morning. Every document, every memo, every pay stub. Don't talk to anyone from Redwood, she warned. Don't post about it online. Don't even tell your neighbors. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. If this is what I think it is, she added, we're not just going to get your pension back. We're going to make them wish they never touched it. I hung up and sat there in the quiet kitchen. Marion's photo smiling at me from the counter. For the first time since that morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Focus. I wasn't finished. Not yet. Mushy. Monday morning, I loaded 3 cardboard boxes into the back of my truck, each filled to the brim with neatly labeled folders, pay stubs, memos, performance reviews, copies of every employee handbook update since 1995. It felt less like I was preparing for a legal consultation and more like I was packing a time capsule of a life spent in loyalty. As I backed out of the driveway, the sun crested over the eastern ridge, bathing the desert in a golden light that didn't match the storm gathering in my gut. I was heading to Janice O'Connell's new office, not to reminisce, but to go to war, paperwork in hand. Mighty. Her office was tucked into a quiet business park on the outskirts of Tempe, far from the sleek glass towers and corporate slogans that defined Redwood's headquarters. A modest sign read, J. O'Connell, HR compliance consultant. Inside, it smelled like old paper and fresh coffee. The walls were lined with books about labor law, employment ethics, and binders labeled by year. No marble floors, no fake smiles, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a woman who had once run Redwood's HR like a Navy ship. She motioned to the table and said, Start unloading. We've got work to do. Janice hadn't changed much. Her hair was a little grayer, but her eyes still had that razor-sharp gleam. She wore a simple navy blazer and glasses that hung from a silver chain. The moment she started flipping through the first file, she was all business. You kept everything, she muttered, almost to herself. Even the memo from 2007 about changes to overtime classifications? I nodded. Marion always said, document like they'll forget who you are. That earned me a half smile. It faded quickly. Sam, she said, her tone dropping into something colder. This looks deliberate. We're not talking about a clerical error. This is calculated. As we spread out the documents in chronological order, a pattern began to emerge. The numbers didn't lie. Neither did the memos. Brandon and Patricia, Redwood's current leadership, had updated policies under the guise of efficiency, but buried in the fine print were changes that manipulated how years of service were calculated. They shifted goalposts, rewrote timelines. I wasn't the only one affected. Janice had already heard whispers from others who were restructured just before they reached retirement milestones. We need to move fast, she said, because if we dig any deeper, we might not just be chasing injustice. We might be chasing a crime. And she showed me how the process would work. First, we'd file a complaint with the Department of Labor, specifically under ERISA violation protocols. They'd open an investigation, gather records, interview witnesses. If they found a pattern of terminating employees to avoid paying pensions, it could lead to federal charges. They're already on Redwood's radar, Janice said. This could be the trigger. I handed her a flash drive with digital scans of everything I'd brought. She labeled it, then pulled out a yellow legal pad and began listing every date and document that stood out. Watching her work, I felt the fog in my mind lift. For the first time since the meeting, I felt like I wasn't just reacting. I was building something, a case, a defense, a weapon. 3 days later, Janice called me at 6:30 a.m. sharp. The DOL's in, she said. They're opening an investigation. And Sam, it's not just you. Her voice dropped. 3 others, same department, all over 60, all let go within 90 days of pension eligibility, all with errors in their service record. My stomach flipped. What do we do now? I asked. She exhaled. No? You get ready to be interviewed, and you keep your mouth shut to everyone else. We're not just trying to fix what they broke. We're about to shine a floodlight into everything they've been hiding. The next few days were a blur of calls, scans, and quiet tension. The Department of Labor assigned 2 investigators to the case. They wanted interviews, documents, timelines. I met them at a government office that smelled like photocopier ink and dust. They asked me to recount everything, year by year, promotion by promotion. I gave them the memo from Evan's office that contradicted my termination date. I gave them copies of my hiring letter and my corrected pay logs. When I was done, one of the investigators leaned back and said, "Mr. Whitaker, this isn't just an HR screw-up. This smells like a plan." Dim. I walked out of the building into the blinding Arizona sun. My shirt stuck to my back. My fists were clenched, but not in fear, in clarity. They tried to erase me, but instead they'd drawn attention to themselves. The DOL was watching now. So was Janice. And soon maybe the press. This was no longer just about me getting my pension. This was about something bigger. I sat in my truck, started the engine, and looked in the rearview mirror. Behind me were 3 decades of quiet loyalty. Ahead, a firestorm, and I was ready. I didn't expect the phone call to come so soon. It was Tuesday afternoon, and I was in my workshop, sanding down a bookshelf for my daughter, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Unknown caller. I almost didn't answer, but something, instinct maybe, told me to pick up. "Mr. Whitaker?" The voice was smooth, practiced. "This is Brandon Chase." My shoulders tensed. I hadn't spoken to him since that cold meeting with Patricia Lane. "I heard you've been talking to people," he continued. "I hope you're not planning anything you'll regret." It wasn't a conversation. It was a warning. The sun slanted through the blinds of my workshop, casting long bars of light across the sawdust-covered floor. The scent of oak and glue hung in the air. I stood there, phone to my ear, hands stained from hours of shaping wood, work that felt honest, unlike the voice dripping through the speaker. Outside, the wind stirred the desert brush. My tools lay in quiet order, every one of them earned, every one of them useful. Unlike the man trying to threaten me with polite words and corporate menace. Brandon always hid behind procedure. Even now, he didn't raise his voice. "We followed company policy to the letter," he said. "Your service record shows 29 years and 10 months. Simple math." But I knew better. I had the offer letter, dated December 15th, 1995. He was trying to bluff me into silence. What Brandon didn't know was that Janice had already filed the complaint that morning. The Department of Labor had already assigned an investigator. The game was already in motion, and I had no intention of folding. He wasn't just bluffing. He was baiting me to say something over the phone he could use later. If someone filed a frivolous complaint, he said, we'd have to conduct a thorough review of their work history, see if they ever violated any policies, took anything, said anything damaging to the company. That wasn't just a warning. That was a veiled threat. He wanted me to feel afraid, wanted me to believe they could strip away what little dignity I had left. But what he didn't realize was that I'd already lost too much to fear losing more. After I hung up, I sat back down at the workbench. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of knowing I'd struck a nerve. I called Janice right away. "He called me," I said, "tried to intimidate me." She didn't sound surprised. "It means he's scared," she said. "We've got him on record trying to suppress your legal rights." Then she added something that chilled me more than Brandon's words. "You're not the only one. 3 others, all over 60, all terminated within months of pension eligibility, all miscalculations." Janice had already spoken with the DOL investigator. They were pulling personnel files, email records, payroll logs, and what they found was worse than we expected. internal emails between Brandon and the new HR director, Patricia Walsh, emails discussing ways to optimize workforce expenditures and phase out legacy cost centers. My name came up 6 times in the last quarter alone, labeled as a financial liability. A problem. Something to be removed before the books closed on Q4. Not a person, a line item. The next morning, I sat in a conference room with 2 federal investigators. They wore suits that probably cost more than my entire work wardrobe, but they listened closely. They asked me to walk through every year of my time at Redwood, showed me copies of emails I'd never seen. The spreadsheet hit me like a punch to the gut, a list of names, mine and 3 others, under a bold heading, Q4 optimization targets. I felt like throwing up, but I didn't. I sat straighter, gave them every detail I had. When I stepped out into the sunlight afterward, the air felt different, electric, alive. The government wasn't just taking this seriously, they were moving fast. And Brandon's time was running out. He wanted to bury what they'd done under jargon and spreadsheets. But now the truth was on paper, in motion and backed by the weight of federal law. As I drove home, a quiet thought formed in the back of my mind. Maybe loyalty still mattered. Maybe not to them, but to me, to justice, to everyone who ever gave their life to a company and expected decency in return. Next, the storm would break. Thursday morning, I barely slept. My mind kept spinning. Images of spreadsheets, cold HR emails, Brandon's voice threading through everything like static. I kept hearing Janice's words. They called you a legacy cost. I wasn't just fired. I was calculated, forecasted, budgeted out of existence. At 8:30 a.m., I was back in the Department of Labor building. The investigator, Rachel Parks, met me in the lobby. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, handing me a thick folder, "you're going to want to sit down for this." We sat in a plain room on the 5th floor, white walls, metal chairs, and a humming HVAC vent overhead. Nothing dramatic, just a government office where corporate lies came to die. Rachel spread out documents across the table. Memos, internal PowerPoint slides, email chains. She walked me through each one like a prosecutor building a case. My face felt hot, then cold. I kept my hands flat on the table to stop them from trembling. I'd spent nearly 30 years fixing things. Now someone had to fix what they'd tried to break in me. What struck me wasn't just how dehumanizing the language was, it was how open they were about it. Brandon and Patricia didn't hide behind euphemisms. They wrote things like phase out expensive pre-2030 hires and mitigate pension risk exposure. They named us, me, Karen Blass, David McCall, Ray Morales, all over 60, all approaching full benefits, all marked for removal. On a slide titled Q4 Optimization Targets, there we were, bold, highlighted, and labeled by cost impact. I felt like I'd been reduced to a row in Excel, but I also felt something else, fury sharpening into resolve. Rachel explained that what they'd done went far beyond internal decisions, because they used email, cloud servers, and interstate communication to execute the plan. This wasn't just an HR violation. It was wire fraud, federal crime. Janice had already coordinated with the criminal division. What began as a wrongful termination case had evolved into a conspiracy to defraud, and I was now a key witness in a federal investigation. I'd thought the worst had already happened. Turns out the story was just getting started. By Friday, the dossier had subpoenaed Crestwood's email servers. Agents seized laptops from the HR department. Janice updated me in real time. Her voice carried a mix of fire and precision. "They kept everything, Sam," she said. "Meeting notes, drafts, even calendar invites with phrases like Q4 cleanout." That afternoon, I got another call from Crestwood's legal counsel. "Mr. Whitaker," he began, "we'd like to discuss a resolution." I let him talk. Full pension reinstatement, health care coverage, $50,000 in goodwill compensation. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just said, you'll hear from my lawyer. Storm. Later that evening, Janice called with bigger news. They found something else, she said. Documents that show this practice has been going on for at least 3 years. Same pattern, same timing, same language, 18 employees total. I sat down hard in my workshop chair. 18. That meant I wasn't just a case, I was part of a movement. And those responsible weren't just wrong, they were going down. Sam, Janice said, this is going to federal court. It's bigger than us now. I nodded, staring at the edge of my workbench like it held all the answers. The story had started to spread. Local news picked it up. Federal investigation targets Crestwood execs for pension fraud. They didn't name names yet, but that was coming. Brandon's photo would soon be on every business section in the state. I kept working in my garage, not because I had to, but because shaping wood reminded me that good things still responded to honest hands. I started building another bookshelf. This one was for me. By Sunday night, 15 former Crestwood employees had come forward. Janice was organizing them. The class action paperwork was underway. I stood in my driveway under a rising Arizona moon and finally allowed myself a breath of real air. I wasn't alone. We weren't powerless. And the men who thought they could erase our futures with a keystroke were about to learn what real accountability looked like. Monday, I'd testify again. This time, not for me, but for all of us who gave everything and were told it was just business. We were writing a new chapter now. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID stopped me in my tracks. Brandon Chase. I hadn't heard his voice since the day he fired me, like a man signing off on an office supply reorder. For a beat, I thought about ignoring it. Let it ring into voicemail. Let him stew in the silence. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Frank, he said, voice thinner than I remembered. I heard you've been talking to people. I could tell he was trying to sound casual, but fear was leaking through every syllable. I hope you're not planning to do anything regrettable. I was in my kitchen, sanding the edge of a shelf I'd been building for my daughter. The smell of sawdust still clung to my shirt. Outside, Phoenix shimmered in desert heat, sunlight pouring through the blinds and golden slats. But inside me, it was cold. I set the sander down and leaned against the counter. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Regrettable, I repeated. He stammered, backtracked. Look, Frank, we followed protocol. Your service record, 29 years and 10 months, is accurate. I've got the files right here. I didn't even flinch. No, Brandon, you don't. I started December 15th, 1995. I have the letter. Want me to read it to you? That moment marked a shift inside me. I'd spent my whole career being the quiet one, the guy who fixed things without fuss. But now I was the one asking the hard questions. I wasn't pleading for fairness anymore. I was demanding accountability. Brandon tried to bait me into arguing, hoping to steer the conversation into gray areas. I let him talk himself in circles. You know, he said, voice dropping lower, if someone were to file a complaint, the company might be forced to look closely at that person's record, who they talked to, what they said. A threat, plain as desert sun. I knew what he was doing, trying to scare me into silence. But what he didn't know was that Janice had already filed the complaint that morning. He was too late. His fear was confirmation. This wasn't just a miscalculation, it was a strategy. And now he realized the trap he'd laid was collapsing under his own feet. I ended the call with 2 words. Goodbye, Brandon. He didn't call back. That evening, Janice called. The Department of Labor is moving fast, she said. Turns out you're not the only one. 3 other employees, all terminated just before full pension eligibility, all miscalculated. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my old employee ID. My face on that badge was 10 years younger. But the man holding it now wasn't weaker. He was finally ready to fight. Janice continued. The investigator assigned to your case, she's good, and she's bringing in someone from the criminal division. You're going to meet with them Thursday morning. Thursday came, And I walked into the federal building with 3 boxes of paperwork and 29 years of memories. The interview room was cold and smelled faintly of toner. 2 agents, one from the Department of Labor, one from the DA, welcomed me with nods and clipboards. We went through everything: dates, policies, pay stubs, and emails. But what hit hardest were the ones I hadn't seen. Emails between Brandon and Patricia, joking about costly dinosaurs, and trimming fat before winter bonus season. My name appeared 6 times in 3 months. They didn't just plan my exit, they strategized it. One agent looked at me with something like respect. "Based on what we've seen," she said, "this isn't just unethical, it's criminal. Wire fraud, conspiracy, and we think it's bigger than just 4 people." I nodded slowly, still processing. They showed me a presentation slide Brandon gave to the board. Legacy Employee Transition Strategy. Under Q4 targets, my name, Karen's, David's, and Ray's. They'd turned us into savings projections. "We're going to need you to testify," she said. I didn't hesitate. "Tell me where to be." By the time I stepped out of that building, the world looked different. The sky was just as blue, the desert just as hot. But I walked taller. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't being erased. I was being heard. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was standing up for every employee who'd ever been told their loyalty was a liability. The news trucks hadn't arrived yet. The headlines hadn't broken. But I could feel it coming. The reckoning was no longer a question. It was a countdown. Friday afternoon, my phone rang again. But this time it wasn't Brandon. It was Crestwood's actual legal counsel. "Mr. Delaney," the voice on the line said, "we'd like to discuss a resolution." His tone was flat, professional, but I heard the panic beneath it. By now, the Department of Labor had seized company servers. The local news had caught wind of the story. I could practically feel the walls closing in on Brandon. "We're prepared to offer full reinstatement of your pension," the lawyer continued, "plus health benefits and a one-time compensation package." I leaned against the workbench in my garage, fingers tracing a knot in the oak slab. "How much?" I asked. $50,000, he said. I was standing in my garage, the late afternoon sun streaming through the half-open door. Dust motes floated in the golden light. The smell of varnish, oil, and sun-baked wood filled the air. My latest project, an oak bookshelf, stood half-assembled beside me. It felt almost symbolic, something steady being built amid chaos. My tools, once a symbol of routine, now felt like instruments of reclamation. On the bench lay the manila folder from the federal interview, and beside it, a newspaper open to the business section. Brandon's face stared back at me, gray, wilted, caught mid-blink. Headlines didn't lie. Federal investigation targets tech execs over pension fraud. I'd spent my life avoiding confrontation. Keep your head down, show up, do your job. But now I wasn't just the man who fixed boilers and rewired circuits. I was the man who lit a fire in the belly of a federal case, and they were feeling the heat. The offer was bait. They hoped I'd settle quietly, patch my dignity with 50 grand, and disappear. But it wasn't about money anymore. It was about every early morning, every missed birthday, every floor I mopped at 2 a.m. to keep things running. Janice had warned me. "They'll try to buy you out before the wave hits," she said. She was right. I called Janice. "Don't take it," she said before I even told her the number. "Frank, they're cornered. The criminal charges are just the beginning. This is going federal." That same day, 8 more employees came forward. By Thursday, 15. All stories like mine: loyalty punished, benefits denied. The numbers grew faster than they could hide them. The media picked it up. Brandon's photo made the front page. He looked like a man who'd just realized his parachute had been packed by karma. I didn't need to shout. I just had to wait. The truth was louder. That weekend, reporters started calling. I let them go to voicemail. I wasn't looking for headlines. I was looking for justice. Monday morning, another call came, this one from a federal prosecutor. They wanted more documentation. I gave them everything. The offer letter from 1990, the email about retirement policy changes, the memo Brandon signed that contradicted the termination math. They were building something. Bigger than me, bigger than Crestwood. Tuesday, my phone buzzed again. Janice, turn on channel 6 now. I grabbed the remote and flipped the TV on. There it was, Brandon Chase in a suit that suddenly looked too large, being led out of Crestwood's headquarters in handcuffs. Behind him, federal agents carried out box after box of files. The news anchor read the charges: wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud employees, and obstruction of justice. 14 counts, up to 70 years in prison. I stood frozen, breath shallow. The man who once told me, "It's just business, Frank," was now being escorted into a federal vehicle, his career and his freedom falling apart like a rusted pipe. That afternoon, the final call came. "Your pension is reinstated," the lawyer said, voice stripped of arrogance. "Backdated, with full health care coverage, and $200,000 in additional compensation." I didn't say anything right away. The silence must have scared him. "We'll also cover your legal fees," he added quickly, "and offer a formal apology." I thanked him and hung up. Janice called 10 minutes later. "You did it, Frank, and not just for you. 18 people will sleep better tonight because you didn't back down." I stared out my window at the desert sky, the sun dipping below the mountains. Justice, I thought, doesn't always come with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives in handcuffs. That evening, I walked out to my workshop and finished the bookshelf. Solid oak, dovetail joints, hand-sanded edges, a gift for my daughter, who'd waited months. I loaded it into the truck, my hands steady. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even relieved. I was just whole. 3 months earlier, I was a man nearing retirement with a promise slipping through his fingers. Now I was a man who stood up, who said no, who helped build something bigger than a cabinet or a compressor system, something called accountability, and I still had one more delivery to make. Chapter. The following week, I was back in my workshop, shaping the last of the bookshelf shelves, the whir of the sander almost meditative. My pension payments had started, like clockwork, just as they should have. The settlement money sat untouched in my savings account, accruing interest. I hadn't spent a dime of it. I didn't feel like it belonged to the version of me who once clocked in every morning without question. This was something else entirely. A symbol that justice, though slow, could still keep pace with wrongdoing. As I ran my hand over the smooth grain of the oak, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Closure didn't come in courtrooms. It came in small, steady acts of rebuilding. Sunlight poured into the garage in golden sheets. My tools hung neatly on the pegboard. Outside, the Phoenix desert gleamed with late fall brightness, the kind that warms bones without scorching skin. In the corner, my old Crestwood toolbox sat unopened, a relic from a former life. My daughter was due in an hour to pick up the bookshelf. I'd promised her this piece before everything went sideways. The same hands that had repaired server rooms and HVAC systems now shaped wood for someone I loved, not a company that had betrayed me. Sawdust clung to my boots, and I didn't mind one bit. This was honest labor, untainted by hidden agendas or budget cuts. In the mirror above the bench, I caught my reflection. Older, sure, but sharper too. I had changed. Retirement hadn't softened me, it had clarified me. I realized I had allowed the hum of duty to drown out the whisper of purpose for too long. When I first started at Crestwood, I was rebuilding after a divorce. Then Marion and I tried to make a new life. Then she got sick. Then I buried her. Work was the constant until it wasn't. Now I knew I was more than what I fixed. I was what I stood up for. I was a man who built not just with hands, but with principles. 2 weeks after Brandon's arrest, I got a letter in the mail. Not from Crestwood, but from a lawyer representing a class action suit filed by former employees. They wanted me to join as a lead plaintiff. Janice had told me this might happen. "Your story unlocked the vault," she said. And it had. 18 employees affected, millions in unpaid benefits. The government had already issued indictments. Brandon had pled guilty to 14 counts. Patricia got 6 months in probation. Crestwood had been acquired by a larger firm, new name, new leadership, and hopefully, new ethics. As for me, I signed the letter and returned it by certified mail. Closure wasn't enough. I wanted reform. That night, I sat down with my daughter. She'd seen the news. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said. "You didn't let them walk over you." I smiled, not because of the praise, but because I could finally believe it myself. We talked late into the evening about Mom, about legacy, about what it meant to leave something behind, not money, not titles, but choices that showed others what mattered. "You didn't just fix things," she said, "you changed them." I hadn't thought of it that way before, but she was right. I hadn't repaired Crestwood. I'd revealed it, and that meant something. And a week later, I received an official copy of the federal ruling. It was final. All affected employees would receive restitution, full pensions, and damages. My name was listed first. I stared at it for a long time, not for ego, for affirmation. I'd fought a system built to break people quietly. I hadn't just survived, I'd redefined my exit. The verdict came not just with restitution, but recognition. For 30 years,